Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. A gust of hot desert wind whipped across the crumbling alleyway, stinging Rowan Davis's eyes with sand. It was after midnight in Albahir, a city scarred by conflict, where brick walls stood half demolished and the distant pop of gunfire echoed like distant fireworks. Rowan, dressed in plain clothes, crouched behind a collapsed section of concrete. The heat pressed down on him as he scanned the narrow street with quick, deliberate glances. His heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his breathing steady. In one hand, he clutched a small handheld radio. On the other end of that frequency, a pair of local agents waited for his signal. Rowan's mission was simple in principle, but lethal in practice. Intercept a notorious arms dealer rumored to be supplying black market explosives. A burst of gunfire erupted 2 blocks away, snapping Rowan to full alert. He pressed the transmit button on his radio. "Team 2, confirm your position," he whispered. There was a brief static hiss, then a low reply. 30 meters south, near the burnt-out pharmacy. We see 1 guard posted at the corner. Rowan exhaled. "Copy. Hold until I move in." He felt a dull ache in his left shoulder, still bruised from an earlier scuffle, but there was no time to dwell on pain. Glancing down, he noticed a smear of blood on his sleeve. Nothing serious, just a scrape from climbing over rubble. Tonight was only halfway done. Suddenly, the phone in his pocket buzzed against his thigh. At first, he considered ignoring it. He couldn't afford any distraction. But the name on the screen made his stomach tighten. Rosalind. His wife rarely messaged him during these midnight ops. She knew better than most how unpredictable his assignments could be. A second bullet pinged off a metal dumpster somewhere ahead, forcing Rowan to flatten himself against the nearest wall. Heart pounding, he quickly read the text that appeared on the lock screen. "I have a terrible feeling. When are you coming home?" He swallowed hard, a pang of guilt twisting inside him. "I should be home with her, but I'm here with a loaded gun." Another blast of gunfire rattled a car window not far away, and he realized he had no choice. He had to switch back to mission mode. Shoving the phone into his pocket, he nodded at the local agent stepping from the shadows. They advanced together along the alley's edge. Sweat trickled down Rowan's brow as he forced away thoughts of Rosalind, focusing only on the glow of a broken street lamp illuminating the meeting spot. There, a group of 3 men stood near a sand-caked SUV, exchanging hushed words. One carried a bulky duffel bag, presumably stuffed with arms or contraband. Rowan signaled to the local agents to move in from the flank. A single shot cracked the night. Rowan dove behind a twisted section of fence, adrenaline surging. He heard frantic shouting in a language he half understood. 1 bullet whizzed past his head, striking the wall in a burst of cement dust. For a split second, he flashed on Rosalind's text. "She's worried about me tonight, and maybe for good reason." Regaining composure, Rowan peered around the corner. The men were scattering. Someone was yelling orders. Gritting his teeth, Rowan emerged. He moved with practiced precision, firing a warning shot into the air to force them down. The local agent stormed in, tackling the arms dealer's bodyguard to the ground. One of the suspects broke free, sprinting across the street. Rowan lunged after him. The chase was brief. His target tripped on loose debris. Rowan pinned the man's wrist, disarming him of a handgun. In the scuffle, Rowan's forearm slammed against a jagged stone. He suppressed a grimace of pain and forced the man into submission. The transaction was thwarted. Sirens wailed in the distance, a sign that local backup was finally on its way. The atmosphere still crackled with tension, but the immediate danger had passed. Rowan stood, panting, dust swirling around him. One of the local agents gave him a thumbs-up. They had seized the bag, the suspects were handcuffed, and the night's mission, for the most part, was a success. Yet as Rowan dusted himself off, a deep unease settled in his gut. He couldn't shake Rosalind's anxious words from his mind. He should have been with her in New York tonight, if only circumstances were different. Slipping into a darkened doorway for a moment's peace, he checked his phone. Another message from Rosalind glowed on the screen. "We need to talk. Call me right away." His throat felt tight. He stared at the text, the distant sirens wailing louder, the night wind swirling hot air that smelled of gunpowder and regret. A bitter thought stabbed through him. It's never good when she says, "We need to talk." Wincing from his bruised shoulder, Rowan pocketed the phone again. Duty or marriage, he was tired of choosing, but the choice always seemed to be made for him. A swirl of headlights swept across the cracked pavement as more local vehicles arrived. Rowan let out a weary sigh. He should coordinate the final handover of suspects. Then, maybe he'd get 5 minutes alone to call Rosalind back, except part of him already sensed that this conversation would be even more explosive than the mission he'd just wrapped up. Rowan Davis frowned at the flight manifest in his hand. The transatlantic red-eye back from Al-Bahir had landed him in Washington, D.C. just before dawn. Usually he welcomed the approach of daybreak, but today it only served to remind him how little sleep he'd gotten in the last 48 hours. He slung a single carry-on bag over his shoulder, stepping out of the airport into a drizzle that blurred the edges of the city lights. A government sedan idled at the curb, driven by a taciturn agent Rowan vaguely recognized. Once settled into the back seat, Rowan closed his eyes, but Rosalind's frantic messages from the previous night buzzed through his head. They'd barely spoken since he left for Al-Bahir. Every time he planned to call, either duty intervened or she was the one preoccupied with her high-stakes cases in Manhattan. He twisted the wedding band on his finger, a habit he'd developed whenever stress piled up. When he opened his eyes again, the car was winding through Georgetown's narrow roads. Mist clung to the brick sidewalks. Stately townhouses with wrought iron railings lined the street. Finally, the car halted in front of a modest, 2-story brick building. Rowan thanked the driver and hopped out. He trudged up 3 steps and unlocked the door of a small bureau-owned apartment, his base when not traveling. Inside, the space felt more like a placeholder for someone who never stayed long. The furnishings were minimal, the walls nearly bare, save for a single photograph. Rowan and Rosalind at Niagara Falls, taken on a rare weekend getaway a year ago. He set his bag down and immediately dialed Rosalind. No answer. He left her a short voicemail, something about, "I'm back in D.C., please call." Then he forced himself to shower off the desert grime, hoping the scalding water might perk him up. An hour later, Rowan found himself at bureau headquarters, running on black coffee and adrenaline. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he gave a quick debrief to his section chief. Their expressions held the usual mixture of appreciation and hurry. A tall man named Lucas Harrington, known for his abrupt manner, raised an eyebrow at Rowan once the debrief ended. "Impressive job, Davis," Harrington said. "But we've got a new assignment you won't be able to refuse. You'll be heading to London in less than a week." Rowan froze. "London? Sir, Harrington cut him off. "We need your skill set in a joint operation with MI5. Marina Price will be your main contact there. This is a priority for our overseas division." "Understood," Rowan replied, careful to keep any protest out of his tone. Inside, he felt a knot twist tighter. Another trip. Another indefinite timeline. Rosalind is going to hate this. By the time Rowan stepped outside the bureau building, the drizzle had turned into a steady rain. He slipped into a cafe across the street to find a quiet corner and attempt a video call to Rosalind. The screen connected after a moment. Rosalind's face appeared, framed by the bright windows of her New York apartment. She looked exhausted, maybe from staying up late. Her hair was pinned back and she wore a slight frown. "Rowan," she greeted coolly. "Didn't expect you to call at this hour. It's almost noon," he answered, forcing a half smile. "I just got back to D.C." She inhaled sharply. "You said you were in the Middle East again. Are you okay?" He nodded, feeling awkward. "I'm fine. It was. Tense. I'm sorry I couldn't call sooner." A flicker of something crossed her features. Relief, worry, maybe anger. She exhaled, her voice quiet. "I can't keep waiting like this, Rowan. Some days I don't know where you are. Other days you vanish completely. And then you reappear, expecting me to act like everything's normal." Her words stung more than he expected. "Look, I promise to come up to New York. This week, if I can. I know we need to talk." Rosalind pressed her lips together, seemingly debating what to say. Finally, she mumbled, "Fine. But soon, Rowan. Don't push it off again. Then, as if losing the will to argue further, she blinked and ended the call. The cafe noises swelled around him, milk steaming, cups clinking, quiet chatter. Rowan sat there a moment, the phone still in his hand. The same uneasy dread settled into his bones. Rosalind's voice told him she was at a breaking point. He left the cafe, stepping back into the rainy Georgetown street. Water splashed around his boots as he made his way to the apartment. Each step felt heavier than the last. What if I'm already too late? He wondered, picturing Rosalind in her Manhattan office, the tension etched into her face. The question echoed in his mind. What is she hiding? The Manhattan skyline loomed outside Rosalind Taylor's floor-to-ceiling windows. Steel towers, blinking lights, a blur of midday traffic along the avenues below. She stood by the glass, arms crossed, as if looking for answers in the bustle of the city. Her reflection revealed a woman in a tailored navy blazer, with thoughtful eyes that hinted at her upbringing in a privileged family. But for all her outward poise, Rosalind's thoughts raced. Her husband was back stateside, though still hundreds of miles away in Washington. An odd sense of relief mixed with frustration curdled inside her. The door to her office clicked open, revealing a confident figure in a crisp shirt and tie. Killian Sanders, a senior partner at Hawthorne and Pearson. He gave her a smooth nod. Rosalind, do you have a moment? I wanted to go over those contract clauses for the Griffinson case. She turned, hiding her internal storm behind a polite smile. Yes, come in, Killian. I was just about to recheck the final draft. Killian moved closer, handing her a slim folder. In the bright office lighting, she noticed how carefully he'd combed his dark hair, how he seemed perpetually collected, as if every moment was an opportunity to assert his place at the top. We have a meeting with the client tomorrow morning, he said, but I'm confident you'll present it flawlessly. You've got a knack for reading these documents in ways even I don't. There was a subtle glimmer in his eyes, perhaps admiration, perhaps something else. Rosalind realized she took a small measure of satisfaction from this attention. The corner of her mouth curled into a faint grin, though a wave of guilt pricked her. Why am I looking for validation from him? She forced her voice to remain neutral. Thanks, Killian. I'll finalize it by tonight. He nodded. Good. By the way, a few of us are grabbing a late dinner after hours to talk strategy. You should join, especially if you want more insight into the firm's expansions. Dinner. She thought of Rowan again. He was in D.C., promising to visit soon. The memory of his anxious voice crackled in her mind, reminding her that their marriage was on unsteady ground. And yet here she was, standing in front of a man who exuded an effortless charm that Rowan, always halfway around the world, couldn't replicate. Outside the window, a helicopter buzzed past, droning like an omen. She cleared her throat. I might come. Depends on how much I can wrap up here. Killian leaned against her desk, arms folded. Well, you're certainly one of our rising stars. If you change your mind, let me know. These dinners are a good place to talk bigger picture strategies and maybe unwind a bit. She thanked him, and he drifted out of her office with that poised confidence. Alone again, Rosalind sank into her chair. She hated feeling torn. Rowan meant the world to her once, but now she couldn't ignore the pang of loneliness each time he disappeared for weeks. Scrolling her phone, she saw his brief voicemail from earlier. She hit play. Hearing his gentle tone, Hey, it's me. I'm back in D.C., but I want to come see you. Call me. Something twisted in her chest. Part of her longed to pick up the phone, call him back right now, and demand he explain why their life together had turned so complicated. Another part resented that she was always the one waiting. She glanced at the clock, considering whether to accept Killian's dinner invite. She pictured the alternative, going home to an empty apartment in Midtown, microwaving dinner, and rereading depositions alone. Just then, her phone buzzed with a text from Rowan. I'll try to be in NYC in a few days. Can't wait to see you. Love you. Rosalind bit her lip, her heart fluttering. She quickly typed a terse reply, Okay, see you soon. Then set the phone aside. She couldn't bring herself to text anything more affectionate, not when the divide felt so vast. The day wore on in a blur of contract reviews, phone calls with clients, and restless glances at the city outside. By the time she grabbed her coat to leave, the sun was already sinking behind the skyscrapers, painting the skyline with shades of orange. Standing by the elevator, she opened her phone again. A pang of guilt nudged her as she reread Rowan's text. She swiped it away, wanting to ignore the swirling doubts. And then, as if to remind her that she did have choices, a new message from Killian popped up. "Dinner at 8? We'll discuss the real estate expansions for next quarter." She paused, gazing at her reflection in the elevator doors. She pictured Rowan's face, then Killian's easy smile. Her chest tightened, uncertain which direction to take. "I just want to feel like I'm not alone," she thought, stepping into the elevator. In the hush of the descending car, she made her decision with a quick reply. "Count me in." 2 days later, Rowan Davis found himself on a late-night train bound for New York City. He'd managed to bargain for a short postponement on his next assignment, promising the bureau he'd wrap up personal matters quickly. The train rocked gently as it sped along the route, the rhythmic clack of wheels almost lulling him to sleep. But sleep eluded him. Instead, he stared at his phone, rereading Rosalind's last text. "We'll talk when you get here." Her tone felt distant, but at least she was giving him an opening. Around 10 p.m., the train pulled into Penn Station. Tired travelers jostled around him, but Rowan moved with a grim purpose, weaving through the crowds, climbing stairs 2 at a time. Outside, a swirl of car horns, neon lights, and the rush of New York nighttime greeted him. He caught a cab to Rosalind's apartment in Midtown. Every block they passed rattled his nerves a bit more. He wanted to believe a short visit could fix everything, that they could discuss, argue if needed, and then find a solution. Yet part of him feared they were already past a point of no return. When he stepped into the building's lobby, the doorman recognized him and handed him a small envelope. "Miss Taylor wanted you to have this," the man said politely. Rowan thanked him, opening the note while waiting for the elevator. "I left dinner in the oven. I'll be home soon working late. R." A gentle sigh escaped his lips. At least she'd cooked. That was something. Up on the 14th floor, he entered the apartment. The lights were dim, the living room spotless yet oddly impersonal like a hotel suite. He found a casserole dish in the oven still warm, so he helped himself to a quick meal. Minutes passed, then an hour. Rowan paced the living room, noticing small details. A new lamp in the corner, fresh lavender-scented candles on the coffee table. On the shelf, he spotted a framed photo from their honeymoon, both of them beaming at Niagara Falls. The memory pinched his heart, reminding him of a time they felt so aligned in dreams and devotion. At last, close to midnight, the front door clicked open, and Rosalind stepped in, her shoulders slumped from exhaustion. She wore a slim black dress under a light overcoat, a hint of perfume lingering around her. Rowan set aside the glass of water he was holding. "You okay?" She put her bag down, her eyes flicking over him. "Long day at work," she murmured. "Client dinner." "Client dinner?" he echoed gently. "You didn't say anything about that in your note." She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "It came up last minute. She trailed off, looking uneasy. He nodded, sensing an undercurrent of tension. "I'm just glad you're here," he offered, his voice low. They embraced briefly. The hug felt hesitant, like they were both unsure how close to get without reigniting unspoken resentments. As they pulled apart, Rosalind cleared her throat. "Thanks for coming," she said. "Let's eat together well. You've probably eaten, right?" "I did," he admitted, "but we can sit for a moment." They settled at the small dining table. She sipped a glass of water, while Rowan quietly studied her expression. He noticed a faint trace of eyeshadow, maybe from her client dinner, and something about her posture looked guarded. Rosalind took a breath. "So, you're leaving again soon, I assume," he winced. "I have to. The Bureau wants me in London next week. It's not optional," she finished for him, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Of course." A charged silence stretched between them. He reached for her hand, but she withdrew slightly. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know this is hard, but I promise after London I'll have a break. A real one. We can figure out a better balance." Her eyes wavered. "Rowan, you've said that before," she whispered. I feel like I'm talking to a ghost sometimes. He swallowed hard. I get it. Listen, I want to try. Can we? Before he could finish, her phone, left on the table, buzzed with an incoming call. For a split second, the caller ID glowed bright. Killian Sanders. Rowan froze, a chill creeping up his spine. Rosalind stiffened, grabbing the phone. Her voice trembled as she declined the call, placing the device face down. It's just a colleague, she mumbled. He nodded slowly, an uneasy stir in his gut. Yeah, sure. Outside, the hum of the city lights seemed to throb like an unspoken warning. Within the apartment, they were left staring at each other across the table, the tension thick as the humid summer air. Rowan forced a small smile. Look, I want to give us more time. Truly. Rosalind blinked, her expression torn between hope and something else. Then promise me, she said quietly, that once you're back from London, we'll actually talk, really talk. He nodded, leaning forward. I promise. In the background, a siren wailed somewhere in the concrete jungle. The swirl of city noise reminded them both that the world outside wouldn't pause to let them fix their marriage. They had to fight for it or watch it unravel. Rosalind rose, her eyes drifting from him to the phone on the table. I'm going to change, she murmured. You can stay the night, of course. He gently touched her arm. Thank you. And I love you, he added, hoping it might bridge the gap. She offered a faint nod, stepping away down the hall. Rowan exhaled, glancing at the phone screen still resting on the table. The name Killian Sanders hovered in his mind like a flicker of lightning in the distance, unsettling, but too far off for him to see the full storm. Still, as he listened to Rosalind's footsteps retreat, a knot twisted in his chest. He had promised to come back. But what if by then everything was already set on a collision course? Late on a chilly Wednesday evening, most of the lights at Hawthorne and Pearson had gone dark. Only a few offices on the 31st floor remained illuminated. Rosalind Taylor leaned over a stack of contracts, her eyes heavy from a day full of meetings. She tapped a pen against her notepad, half aware that her coffee had long since gone cold. Across the hallway, she spotted a faint glow from another desk, which turned out to be Fiona Marsh, a junior associate who often worked overtime. As Rosalind gathered her files, Fiona approached with a sympathetic smile. Heading out soon? Fiona asked, rubbing her tired eyes. I should, Rosalind replied softly, but I need to finalize these clauses first. Before Fiona could respond, footsteps echoed behind them. Killian Sanders emerged, impeccably dressed as always, his dress shirt sleeves rolled up in a casual display of confidence. He held 2 fresh takeaway cups. I thought I was the only one stuck here, he said, raising an eyebrow at the small group. Turning to Rosalind, he extended a cup. Double espresso, just the way you like it. Care to share the fun of drafting late-night amendments? Fiona blinked, exchanged a quick glance with Rosalind, then discreetly excused herself to gather some binders. That left Rosalind and Killian alone in the corridor. Rosalind took the coffee with a polite nod, grateful for something hot in her hands. I appreciate it, she murmured. I was about to pass out from reading these clauses for the 10th time. Killian gave a half smile. You're carrying a heavy load lately. Word is the senior partners have noticed. And they like what they see. Heat rose in Rosalind's cheeks, though she wasn't sure if it was pride or embarrassment. I'm trying my best, she said. This place is tough, but I enjoy the challenge. They walked side by side into Rosalind's office. Her desk was strewn with open folders, highlights marking key paragraphs. Killian perched on the edge of a nearby chair, sipping his own espresso as he scanned the documents. Impressive work, he remarked, flipping through a few pages. You're handling cases that normally go to more senior associates. Guess you're a natural. Rosalind allowed herself a small smile. I'm just following the firm's standards, she said, though she felt a flicker of pride. But honestly, I could use an outside perspective. Killian shrugged. We could brainstorm over a late dinner if you're up for it. Sometimes an outside setting helps cut through the mental fog. She checked the clock on her phone. Nearly 9 p.m. Rowan was in D.C., and their last conversation short, fraught with tension, nagged at her thoughts. Her gaze drifted to the dark sky beyond the window, lights of Manhattan painting the glass. Should I just go home alone again? But the idea of heading back to an empty apartment with no one waiting except her own worries about Rowan felt suffocating. Killian's invitation, though businesslike, sounded more appealing than solitude. Maybe, Rosalind said hesitantly. I don't want to keep you, though. It's already late. Killian smiled. I'm game. Grab a bite, refine a few bullet points, then we both can go home with a clearer plan. What do you say? Rosalind glanced at the unopened text messages on her phone, none from Rowan tonight. Sure, she finally agreed, voice tight. Let's wrap up these final notes, then we can head out. A hint of triumph flickered across Killian's face. He slid one of the documents closer. Excellent. Let's start by reviewing Clause 4C together, see if we can tighten the language about liability. As they dove into the details, the hum of fluorescent lights above them set a strangely intimate tone. Fiona occasionally passed by, but most of the staff had gone home. Outside, the city pulsed, but inside this office, the two of them quietly conferred, leaning closer over paragraphs of legal jargon. Rosalind fought a gnawing guilt. She reminded herself, it's work, nothing more. Yet she couldn't deny the subtle warmth of having someone appreciate her efforts, and especially at a time she felt Rowan drifting so far away. At 9:30, Fiona bid them good night and left. The hush in the hallway deepened. Killian closed the final folder with a flourish. That should hold for tomorrow's review, he said, resting his elbow on the desk. Ready for that late-night meal? I know a spot nearby that stays open. Rosalind inhaled, wrestling with her own sense of boundaries. This was, after all, just a professional outing, wasn't it? She heard her own voice answer, Yes, let's go. And with that, they gathered their things. While she locked her computer, Rosalind caught a glimpse of her phone's screen, still no new messages. She swallowed the lingering ache in her chest, then forced a smile at Killian. 2 days later, inside a cramped bureau office in Washington, Rowan Davis scrolled through his inbox, mentally preparing for an upcoming flight to London. A half-finished coffee grew cold on his desk. His dark hair was slightly ruffled from lack of sleep. He'd been up late drafting mission plans. Just then, a quiet knock sounded. Lucas Harrington, Rowan's no-nonsense section chief, strode in, dropping a sealed envelope on the desk. Arrived for you this morning, Harrington said tersely, nodding at it. No return address. Probably more intel from one of our local contacts. Rowan thanked him and waited until Harrington left before cutting the seal. He expected some cryptic notes about arms traffickers, but inside, he found 2 low-resolution photos. Immediately, his gut clenched. In the first shot, Rosalind was exiting the Hawthorne and Pearson building at dusk. Beside her was Killian Sanders, a half-smile on his face. The second photo showed them turning a corner together, the streetlights reflecting off their hair, framed by the swirl of evening pedestrians. Nothing overtly incriminating, but they looked closer than mere colleagues leaving work. What the hell? Rowan muttered, confusion swirling. Who sent these? And why? He studied the angles. They appeared taken from across the street, maybe a smartphone camera. Rosalind's expression was neutral. Killian's posture was comfortable, as if he was used to walking with her. Rowan could practically taste the bitterness rising in his throat. His phone buzzed with a text from Agent Sophie Brooks, a co-worker who occasionally teased him about his marriage. Let's finalize your flight details. Email me your passport scan. Shaking off the dread, Rowan typed a brisk reply, but his eyes kept drifting back to those photos. Could just be after-work drinks, he told himself. Could be nothing. Yet an uncomfortable memory rattled in the back of his mind. The last time he visited Rosalind, her phone had rung with Killian's name. She'd brushed it off, but there was a spark of tension he couldn't ignore. Am I paranoid? His office phone rang, snapping him out of it. Rowan picked up, forcing calm into his voice. Davis speaking. A faint female voice, a bit breathless. Rowan, it's me, Rosalind. He felt a small surge of relief. Maybe she was calling to say she missed him. Hey, he said softly, leaning back in his chair. Good to hear your voice. I don't have long, Rosalind began. I'm about to step into a meeting, just checking on you. You said you'd call me last night. Guilt stabbed him. He'd been swamped with pre-deployment briefings. I'm sorry. Things got intense at the office. Tense. How are you doing? She was silent for a moment. Busy, you know, trying to keep afloat. There was a pause, then a slight hesitation. Anyway, I should go. We'll talk soon? Absolutely, Rowan promised. We need a proper conversation. She mumbled a soft, bye, then ended the call. Setting the receiver down, Rowan flicked his gaze back to the photos. The conversation had felt stilted, as though she were holding back. A trickle of suspicion slithered deeper into his mind. His phone buzzed again. Agent Brooks wanted him in the briefing room. Sighing, Rowan stuffed the photos into a desk drawer. He had no clue who sent them or what motive they had, but one thing was certain. He couldn't ignore the gnawing unease. As he hurried to the briefing, Harrington stepped out of a conference room and intercepted him. We've fast-tracked your London assignment, Harrington said without preamble. Marina Price is expecting you in 3 days. Make sure you're ready. Rowan nodded automatically. But inside, his thoughts churned. 3 days, I won't have time to see Rosalind before that. When Harrington walked away, Rowan found himself alone in the corridor, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. He pictured his wife's voice, the tension in it. He imagined her walking home with that colleague. 1,000 questions hammered at his mind, yet the Bureau's demands wouldn't wait, and neither would the flight to London. He turned, heading for the briefing. The tightness in his chest told him the real conflict wasn't just halfway around the globe, it was right here at home. It was nearly 10:30 p.m. when Rosalind glanced at the clock in the near-deserted Hawthorne and Pearson offices. She'd stayed late again to finish drafting a crucial motion. Overhead, the strip lighting hummed quietly, casting a clinical glow on the scattered briefs across her desk. Through the glass panel, she saw Killian Sanders still at his desk, reviewing files with a laser-like focus. Their eyes met momentarily. He gave a casual nod, then returned to reading. As the minutes crept by, Rosalind closed her final document. She grabbed her jacket, intending to head straight home, but a swirl of thoughts about Rowan's distant presence unsettled her. He's not coming to New York after all, she reminded herself. Something about London. The phone on her desk buzzed softly. A text from Killian. Fancy a quick chat about tomorrow's depositions before you leave? She inhaled a steadying breath and typed back a short, sure. Her pulse throbbed with a faint mixture of nerves and curiosity. Stepping out, she found Killian leaning against his doorframe, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. There was a hint of tension in the air like a coiled spring. I figured you must be exhausted, he said, voice warm. Just wanted to check if you needed a break or company for a moment. Rosalind forced a smile. A break sounds good. I was about to pass out from looking at legalese. He beckoned her into his office, flipping on a side lamp that created a softer, more intimate ambiance. The wide windows revealed a city shimmering with nightlife below. On a small side table sat a half-empty bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. No pressure, Killian murmured, noticing her gaze. I opened it earlier with a colleague who left. You're welcome to join me for half a glass, or I can put it away. She hesitated. This is a bad idea, but the loneliness gnawing inside her was stronger than her caution. Just a small pour, she finally said, removing her blazer and draping it over the back of a chair. Killian poured, handing her a glass. She sipped, the rich taste unfamiliar at this hour. He asked a few questions about the depositions, but their conversation soon drifted. Her phone vibrated once a random spam email, she realized with a flash of disappointment. Not Rowan. Killian took a seat on the edge of his desk, too close for a purely professional setting. So, any word from your husband? He ventured gently, as if reading the tension in her face. Rosalind's throat went dry. He's busy, she admitted. He'll be overseas again soon. A flicker of empathy crossed Killian's features. That must be tough, he said softly. You're here, holding everything together, and he's off in some far-flung corner of the world. She stared at her wine. It's complicated, she whispered, a tremor of pent-up frustration slipping into her tone. Before she could restrain herself, she felt the words rushing out. How she felt neglected, how Rowan's calls were inconsistent, how she dreaded the emptiness of her apartment each night. It was more than she'd intended to reveal, but once she started, she couldn't stop. Killian listened with surprising attentiveness, occasionally murmuring sympathetic sounds. When she finally fell silent, he reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "Rosalind, you deserve someone who's present," he said quietly. A hush filled the room. She sensed an undercurrent pulsing between them, an invisible line they both knew shouldn't be crossed. Yet she felt drawn, seeking warmth in a moment of emotional isolation. Her heartbeat hammered. She caught a reflection of them in the window, two silhouettes in a quiet, locked building. The city's lights glowed outside, oblivious. Killian leaned closer. She could smell the faint cologne on his collar, the lingering wine on his breath. A tiny voice in her mind screamed, "Stop!" But her body didn't move away. A moment later, his lips grazed hers. It was tentative until she found herself responding. The kiss deepened, her eyes fluttering shut. A rush of heat flared beneath her skin, mingling with guilt. When they finally broke apart, Rosalind's breath trembled. "We can't," she managed, voice unsteady. Killian pressed his forehead gently against hers. "I know," he whispered, though he didn't let go of her. In that heart-pounding hush, they exchanged a look that confirmed they'd already gone too far. Her mind spun with confusion. Rowan, my marriage. This is so wrong. Yet the closeness of another person felt intoxicating after months of feeling alone. Words seemed useless. Killian's hands settled at her waist, carefully but insistently. She felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away, letting the moment sweep her away from responsibility. Their lips met again, and time blurred. Some moments later they pulled apart, breath ragged. She realized the wine bottle on the table had tipped over slightly, but barely a drop spilled. Killian steadied it, then turned back to Rosalind, an unreadable mix of triumph and sympathy on his face. "No one has to know," he murmured. "Just between us." Rosalind swallowed, guilt battering her chest. She nodded numbly, uncertain whether she agreed or just lacked the strength to protest. This shouldn't have happened. In the echoing quiet of the building, she quickly gathered her blazer. Her lips still felt warm, but her stomach twisted in knots. I need to go," she stammered, backing toward the door. Killian watched, his expression complicated. "All right," he said gently. "Take care, Rosalind." She rushed out into the empty corridor, heart pounding as if she'd just crossed a battlefield. The elevator ride down felt endless. She clenched her phone, hoping irrationally that Rowan would call, that his voice might ground her. But no call came. By the time she stepped onto the dark street, a chilly gust made her realize she was trembling. I can't pretend this didn't happen. Yet as she walked under the neon haze, she forced her thoughts away. It was just a mistake. Once. She fought to ignore the voice that warned this was the start of a dangerous path. A brisk evening breeze rippled along the Thames, carrying the scent of damp stones and city bustle. Rowan Davis stood by a riverside cafe, collar turned up against the cool London air. He scanned the waters, mind still tangled in the memory of those photos from Washington. Why did someone send them? A tap on his shoulder drew his attention. Marina Price appeared, wearing a simple yet professional coat, her posture exuding focus. "Long flight?" she asked, a faint London accent flavoring her words. "Yeah, just landed," Rowan admitted, forcing a polite smile. "Thanks for meeting me so quickly." Marina tilted her head, studying his expression. "Of course, the intel's urgent, but you look preoccupied." He shook off the tension, motioning for them to step into the cafe. The interior was cozy, faint, jazzy music in the background. They took a corner table, ordering hot tea and scones. Once they covered the basics logistics for their anti-terror operation, Marina gently probed. "Something else on your mind, Rowan? You don't seem quite yourself." He hesitated, eyes drifting to the steaming cup in front of him. Images of Rosalind and Killian flashed in his head. He wanted to confide, but wasn't sure how. "I've just got stuff back home," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Marital issues, I guess you'd call it." Marina nodded sympathetically. "It happens to all of us in this line of work. Relationships get tested when you're always on the move." Rowan fiddled with the napkin, frustration bubbling inside him. "I'm not even sure what's real anymore. It's like I'm missing something obvious. Or maybe I'm imagining trouble that isn't there. Marina's gaze was steady. I can't speak for your wife, but I've seen how the job can create distances, and if you sense something is off, you might need to confront it head-on, for your own sanity. He managed a half-smile, grateful for her directness. They returned to discussing the mission, though part of Rowan's mind never left Rosalind. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in New York, Rosalind stared at her reflection in her apartment mirror. A wave of guilt churned in her gut. The previous night's lapse with Killian weighed heavily, though they'd said barely a word about it at the office this morning. She ran her hand over the marble countertop, sighing. She'd gotten home too late for proper rest, and each time she closed her eyes, she replayed the moment she crossed that invisible line. Her phone vibrated on the table, Killian, again. She tensed, recalling his last text. We should talk. She'd said she needed space, but he persisted. I can't do this, she whispered to herself, pressing the phone to silent mode. She walked to the kitchen, rummaging for something to eat. The emptiness felt thicker than usual. Rowan's presence was nowhere to be found, just the cold hum of the fridge. She wondered if he'd call or text, but the only new notifications were work emails and one from a friend asking to meet up. Exhaling, she sank into a chair. Her heart pounded with conflicting desires. Part of her missed Rowan intensely. Part of her burned with confusion about Killian. It's just one slip, she told herself, desperate to believe. I can forget it happened. In London, Rowan wrapped up the cafe meeting with Marina. Outside, the sky had turned a deep cobalt, lit by the city's glow. Marina gave him a brief, encouraging nod. We'll start early tomorrow, she reminded him. Meet me at the Bureau Liaison office at 8? Sure, Rowan agreed. Thanks for tonight. It helps to have someone to talk to. She smiled kindly. Good luck clearing your head. See you in the morning. Once alone, Rowan strolled the riverside footpath, the lights of passing ferries reflecting on the water. Despite the crisp air, sweat prickled his temples. He pulled out his phone, tempted to message Rosalind. But what could he say that wouldn't sound accusatory or desperate? He paused near a lamppost, typing a hesitant text. I'm in London safely, missing you. Let's talk soon. Then he hit send, heart hammering. Rosalind's phone chimed in her silent apartment. She lifted it, reading Rowan's words, her eyes stinging with tears of regret. She wanted to reply something genuine, yet the shame of her recent action paralyzed her. We'll talk soon, she finally typed, then paused, fingertips trembling. She added a simple heart emoji, an uneasy gesture of affection before pressing send. Miles apart, they both felt the distance stretch. Rowan glanced at the heart emoji that appeared on his screen. It soothed him, but only slightly. She's still there, he told himself, but the quiet ache remained. Standing at the water's edge, he watched London's skyline shimmer, uncertain if he was losing his marriage or if they still had a chance to fix what was unraveling. A biting wind swept along a dimly lit London backstreet as Rowan Davis exited an unmarked Bureau sedan. He pulled his jacket collar high, the chill striking harder than usual this February evening. Standing nearby, Marina Price waited with her arms crossed, scanning the alley with keen eyes. They were outside a small, shuttered storefront in East London, where a tipster claimed a local money launderer operated on behalf of a terror financing network. The plan was to surveil the location tonight quietly, carefully, and confirm any leads. Marina shot Rowan a look. You look tired, she remarked. Long day? Long few weeks, he admitted, stepping beneath the glow of a flickering street lamp. Too many time zones, too little sleep. She nodded, then nodded at the dark windows. Ready, he exhaled. Let's do it. Under the cover of shadows, they slipped to a vantage point where they could watch comings and goings. Rowan fiddled with an earpiece, glancing at the building's dusty windows. While they waited, Marina produced her phone, checking a map of the area. Anyone inside? Rowan asked quietly. Not that we can see, she replied. Maybe they're running late. Silence settled. Rowan's thoughts drifted. He couldn't help replaying his last phone call with Rosalind. The tension in her voice, the sense that she was hiding something. Part of him wanted to believe it was just stress, that he was imagining the worst. But the anonymous photos still gnawed at his mind. Marina, picking up on his tension, murmured, "You sure you're all right? You've been on edge." Rowan hesitated. They were colleagues first, but after weeks working together, a tentative friendship had formed. She'd proven discreet. It's personal," he said softly. "Marital stuff. I think my wife might be involved with someone else." Marina's brow furrowed. "You suspect, or you know?" "Suspect," he admitted. "Though I have reasons, and I'm torn. Do I confront her or wait for her to come clean?" A gust of wind rattled a loose metal sign overhead. Marina considered his words. "I'm no therapist, but I've seen plenty of relationships crack under this job's pressure. Best advice? If you keep silent, doubt will poison you. If she's truly straying, better to address it than let it fester." Rowan nodded grimly. "Yeah, I just can't shake the feeling I might lose her if I push too hard." Before Marina could respond, a black sedan rolled up to the shuttered storefront. Two men climbed out, scanning the street. Rowan tensed, raising a small camera to capture images. Marina discreetly tapped her phone, sending a quick alert to the support team nearby. They watched as the men rapped 3 times on the metal door. A slot opened, someone inside presumably checking credentials. Moments later, the door squeaked open, and the men disappeared into the building. "We have movement," Marina whispered. "Looks like they're exchanging something." Rowan pressed his radio button lightly. "Team advantage. Suspects entered the storefront. Stay ready." Time ticked on. The adrenaline of the operation briefly pushed away Rowan's personal worries. This was the puzzle he could handle: facts, evidence, arrests. Far simpler than a fraying marriage on another continent. After nearly an hour of tense waiting, the men re-emerged, carrying a small metal case. They locked the door and returned to their sedan. Rowan managed a few zoomed-in photos of license plates, then nodded at Marina. They'd seen enough to confirm suspicious activity. "Let's not blow our cover," she said. "We'll follow up with the local units to track them after they leave." Rowan agreed. Together, they slipped down a side alley, returning to their own car. Once inside, the hush of the interior felt oddly comforting. Marina started the engine. "We'll debrief at the ops center. Then you can get some rest." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Thanks for everything." She offered a soft smile. "We have each other's backs. It's what partners do." Through the windshield, streetlights flashed across Rowan's face, revealing a flicker of relief. He might not have clarity about Rosalind tonight, but at least he wasn't facing these challenges completely alone. Meanwhile, half a world away, Rosalind sat in her high-rise office in Manhattan, well past normal hours. The city sparkled behind her, but she was too distracted to appreciate it. On her screen was a new email from Killian Sanders, a summary of potential clients. Beneath the businesslike text, though, was a short note. "We need to see each other. Soon." Her stomach knotted. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned inside her. She'd repeatedly told herself that their indiscretion was a one-time slip. Yet the more Rowan stayed away, the more she let Killian's presence fill the void. The guilt never fully subsided. She closed the laptop with a sigh, massaging her temples. Despite every rational thought, she still answered Killian's calls. She didn't know how to sever the tie without unraveling her own sense of stability. "This is my mess," she thought, biting her lip. "I can't stop now, but I can't keep going either." Up on the wall, a clock ticked loudly, puncturing the hush. Rosalind stared at it, imagining the hour in London. Rowan's there, does he suspect? But no text from him blinked on her phone. With a weary sigh, she gathered her coat. Outside, the city never slept, but she suddenly felt completely, hopelessly alone. 2 weeks later, a dull February rain misted across Manhattan's sidewalks as Rosalind Taylor shuffled into her bathroom early one morning, feeling unusually nauseous. She'd hoped it was just a lingering cold or stress from too many late nights. But something deeper nagged her intuition. She retrieved a small pregnancy test from the drawer, one she'd bought on impulse a month ago. Her hands trembled when she took it out of the box. What if? Moments later, she stared at the blue lines confirming the result. Her breath caught. She was pregnant. First came the surge of excitement. A baby Rowan's child. but almost immediately fear constricted her chest. Wait, I've been with Killian too. Panic flared like a wildfire. Which man was the father? She sank onto the edge of the bathtub, tears pricking her eyes. I wanted children with Rowan someday, but their marriage was on shaky ground, and now the timeline was tangled in guilt. An hour later at Hawthorne and Pearson, she drifted through the corridors like a ghost. Sitting at her desk, she stared blankly at her monitor. She was pregnant, something she couldn't ignore or delay. She needed time off, but how to explain? Later that day, Killian knocked on her office door. She stiffened, forcing calm. He stepped in, glancing around to ensure privacy. "You look pale," he said softly. "Everything okay?" Rosalind's hands clenched into fists. "I found out I'm pregnant," she whispered, eyes flickering with dread. He froze, pupils widening in shock. "Rosalind, are you sure?" She nodded, unable to voice the chaos swirling in her mind. The color drained from Killian's face. "Is it?" He didn't finish the question, but they both heard it unspoken. "Is it mine or Rowan's?" "I don't know," she admitted, voice trembling. "Timing's too close to call." Killian pressed a hand to his forehead. "We can't let this blow up. You realize if the firm finds out He couldn't even complete the sentence. "People talk. It could ruin us." Her chest felt tight. She looked at him, tears threatening. "What do I do?" she asked, voice almost childlike. Killian inhaled sharply. "Keep it quiet. Let Rowan think it's his." "That's the simplest path, right?" he said, though guilt tugged his words. "We handle this discreetly. Nobody else needs to know." Rosalind swallowed hard. The rational part of her mind cringed at the idea of lying to Rowan about his own child. But the fear of losing everything, her marriage, her career, overwhelmed her. I can't decide right now." Her phone buzzed on the desk, startling them both. She glanced at the screen, a partner requesting she head to a meeting. She stood, nodding stiffly at Killian. "I need some time," she repeated, ignoring the panic rising. "Please, just give me space." He nodded, face taut, and slipped out. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Rosalind to slump into her chair, heart pounding. She had never felt so trapped. By lunchtime, she could barely function. Making up an excuse about migraines, she approached HR, requesting to work from home indefinitely due to health concerns. Her superiors expressed concern, but offered a short leave arrangement, promising confidentiality. All the while, a single question reverberated in her mind. Rowan or Killian? Who is the father? That evening in London, Rowan stepped out of a briefing room. The mission was making progress. They'd identified key players in a terror financing cell. But as he paced a corridor, scrolling his phone, he spotted a text from Rosalind. "We need to talk tonight. It's important." His pulse quickened. At least she's reaching out. He ducked into a quiet stairwell, quickly dialing her number. After 2 rings, her shaken voice answered. "Rowan," she began, I need to tell you something." He sensed her fear. "What's going on, Rose?" She blurted it out in a rush. "I'm pregnant." Rowan's world tilted. His free hand gripped the banister. An immediate smile flickered across his face, mingled with disbelief. "Pregnant?" he repeated. "That's amazing news, right?" Then confusion tightened his chest. The timing, he'd been away for so long. Rosalind's tone wavered. I think so. I'm just worried." "I'll come back," he promised, heartbeat thrumming. "I'll wrap things here as fast as I can." She mumbled something indistinct, then quickly ended the call. Rowan lowered the phone, heart in chaos. Part of him was elated at the idea of fatherhood. Another part whispered, "Check the dates." This might not add up. Night settled in a haze of city lights around Rowan's London hotel. He paced the modest room, phone in hand. Rosalind's abrupt confession of pregnancy stirred both hope and gnawing suspicion. He dialed her again, desperate for clarity. After several rings, she answered, voice subdued. "Rowan," she said wearily, "it's late here. Can we do this tomorrow?" "I can't wait," he replied, forcing calm into his tone. "We need to discuss details." He paused. "I mean, how far along are you?" Silence, then she sighed. "About 3 months, give or take." "My first ultrasound said something like 12 weeks, but they're never exact." 3 months. Rowan did quick math in his head. 12 weeks ago, I was away for at least half that time. Alarm bells rang, but he tried not to jump to conclusions. Rosalind, he pressed gently. When was the last time you know? She bristled. You think I'm lying? She snapped, voice raw. You vanish for weeks, then grill me like I'm on trial? He rubbed his forehead, tension spiking. I'm not accusing you. I'm just trying to understand. Something feels off, and I'm thousands of miles away. A shaky breath came through the line. I get it. But you're making this harder, she muttered. If you can't trust me, why do we even bother? His chest tightened with guilt. He wanted to trust her, but the timeline didn't add up. Look, he said quietly. I'll be back in a few days. Let's talk properly then. Face to face. She gave a non-committal grunt. Fine, just don't treat me like a criminal, please. They ended the call tensely, leaving Rowan more conflicted than ever. He stared at the silent phone, dread gnawing. If she was pregnant, he should be overjoyed. But the question lingered. Is the baby really mine? That same night in Manhattan, Rosalind slumped on her couch, phone still in hand. Her eyes burned from crying. She hated the accusation in Rowan's tone, even if she knew deep down it wasn't baseless. A knock startled her. She froze. Another knock, more insistent. Slowly she shuffled to the door, heart pounding. Through the peephole she saw Killian. Rosalind, he whispered upon entering, his coat dripping from a light drizzle outside. We have to talk. She looked away, hugging herself. I told you I need space. He approached, eyes flicking to the slight curve of her belly she tried to conceal with a loose sweater. I can't just ignore this, he said, voice subdued. You're pregnant, and if it's my child, I need to help you figure things out. She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Rowan called, she admitted. He wants me to prove everything's fine, but it's not fine, Killian. I'm terrified. Killian hovered, uncertain whether to sit beside her. Finally, he perched on the arm of a nearby chair. Look, I know it's complicated, but remember, if we reveal the truth, it'll blow up our lives. You might lose Rowan entirely, and I'll risk my career. She let out a bitter laugh. So your solution is just lie to him forever. Killian's jaw tightened. I'm just saying we handle this discreetly. If in time we find out for sure it's his baby, all is well. If not, we cross that bridge later. Tears welled in her eyes. She stared at him, feeling a twisted sense of resentment that he was so focused on self-preservation. But was she any better? Eventually, she whispered, Leave me alone tonight. Please. He hesitated, then nodded, heading for the door. Before leaving, he paused, voice trembling. Rosalind, I never meant to cause you pain. I'm sorry. She stayed silent, hearing the door shut behind him. A swirl of exhaustion swept through her. I'm stuck, she realized. No matter what, I'm lying to someone. Back in London, Rowan ended his last shift at the Bureau's local office, picking up his briefcase. As he passed Marina's desk, she glanced up. Everything all right? She asked softly. He hesitated. No, but I'm handling it. Going home soon. Marina offered a gentle squeeze of his shoulder. Just remember what we discussed. Honest confrontation, not endless suspicion. Rowan mustered a grateful nod. Thank you, Marina, for listening. A chill rain pelted the windshield of the taxi as Rowan Davis rode from JFK Airport into Midtown Manhattan. His hands were clammy with nerves. 2 days ago, he'd abruptly told his bureau superiors he needed personal leave. The mission in London was mostly wrapped anyway. They'd allowed it. Now, New York's skyscrapers loomed outside the taxi window. Traffic crawled under dark, stormy skies. Rowan clutched a small bouquet of lilies in a gift bag, tokens of reconciliation for Rosalind. Or so he hoped. Pulling up to their apartment building, he thanked the driver and hopped out, nearly slipping on the wet curb. The doorman gave him a polite nod, recognizing him from his scattered visits. The elevator ride felt interminably slow. When he finally reached the apartment door, he paused, heart pounding. One conversation could change everything. He raised a hand to knock, then remembered he still had a key. Slipping it in, he quietly let himself in. Inside, the lights were dim. Rosalind emerged from the hallway, wearing a loose sweater over maternity pants, confirming the subtle swell of her belly. For a second, neither spoke. He offered a tentative smile, extending the lilies and gift bag. "Hi," he said softly. "I, missed you." She eyed the flowers, lips trembling. "Thanks. You're here earlier than I expected." He set down his bag, then gently reached for her free hand. She didn't pull away, but her posture remained tense. "I had to come see you, to talk, about everything." They settled at the small dining table. He asked how she felt. Did she need a cushion, a footrest, anything? She simply shook her head, letting a quiet hush envelop the room. "Rosie," he ventured, using her old nickname. "I need to know the truth about this pregnancy. The dates, the timeline. Something doesn't sit right." She averted her gaze. "You're accusing me of what, exactly?" she murmured, though her tone lacked real anger. More shame than fury. He sighed. "I'm not accusing. I just can't ignore that your due date suggests—" He struggled for the right words. "It might not be my child." Her eyes glistened with tears. She pressed a trembling hand to her belly. "Rowan, you're hardly around. You think I've been unfaithful just because the numbers are off?" He felt a stab of guilt, but forced himself to persist. "Is that so impossible?" he asked, voice low. "If you tell me it's mine, I'll believe you, but I need honesty, Rosalind. Something's been off for months." Her chest heaved, tears sliding down her cheeks. She fiddled with the edge of the table, as if weighing a confession. But after a heavy silence, she swallowed hard. "I am scared," she whispered. "Scared you'll walk away if I'm not perfect." Rowan's heart twisted. He stood, pulling a chair closer, trying to gather her hands in his. "I'm not looking for perfection," he said gently. "But if you are pregnant with our child, I want to be there. If it's not," he exhaled shakily, "we'll deal with it." She nodded, biting her lip, but offered no further clarity. Instead, she changed the subject. "You must be exhausted. Let me make some tea." He recognized her deflection, but let it go for the moment. As she busied herself in the kitchen, he glanced around. A folded ultrasound form lay on the counter, partially visible. His stomach clenched when he saw the projected due date circled. Mid-September. Calculating backwards, he thought, that's right around the time I was deployed. His pulse pounded. She returned with 2 steaming mugs of chamomile. Their eyes met, sharing an unspoken heaviness. They both knew the question still loomed, unresolved. Dinner was quiet, an awkward dance of half-hearted conversation. He asked about her health, her job, and she vaguely mentioned requesting remote work. She tried asking about his mission. He offered minimal details, still bound by secrecy. The tension thickened, unspoken truths hanging in the air like an imminent storm. After the dishes, they sat across from each other, neither touching their phones. The clock on the wall ticked with maddening slowness. "We'll handle this," Rowan finally said. "But we have to be honest, no matter how painful." Rosalind's lips quivered. She merely nodded. Outside, the city's neon glow filtered through the curtains, illuminating them in an uneasy tableau. Both felt the weight of secrets pressing closer. Tonight, they were physically together, but a chasm had formed between them, one that no bouquet or kind word could easily bridge. A late spring breeze swept across the Manhattan skyline as Rowan Davis guided Rosalind, visibly pregnant now, into a popular baby boutique. The shop's large windows showcased pastel onesies and plush toys in bright, inviting displays. From the outside, the couple looked like any excited parent's tobe. Rowan placed a protective hand on Rosalind's back, leading her through aisles full of miniature clothes and strollers. "How about this?" he asked, picking up a soft yellow blanket. Rosalind managed a polite smile. "It's cute," she murmured, trying to sound enthusiastic. At a glance, they seemed happy, Rowan wearing a slight grin, Rosalind nodding at his suggestions. But behind those forced smiles lay a silent tension, coiled tight ever since the unsettling doubts about her pregnancy timeline. Both had decided tacitly to keep the peace and avoid direct confrontation, at least in public. They gathered a few baby items, pushing a small cart along. An older salesperson approached, beaming at Rosalind. Congratulations. How far along are you? Almost 7 months, Rosalind answered, resting a hand on her bump. Rowan offered a nod, though his eyes flickered with unease. The math of her pregnancy still gnawed at him in quiet moments. Yet here he was, determined to play husband, forging a facade of normalcy. They headed to Rosalind's obstetrician appointment, located in an upscale medical building near Central Park. The waiting room's walls were lined with cheerful posters about prenatal yoga and healthy pregnancy tips. Rowan and Rosalind sat side by side, flipping through magazines without really reading them. A nurse soon called them back. Rosalind lay on the exam table, a folded hospital gown beneath her. Rowan hovered by her side, one hand holding hers. A calm-faced doctor performed the standard measurements, ultrasound imaging flickering on a monitor. "Baby seems healthy," the doctor said, smiling at the couple. "Good heartbeat, good growth." A wave of relief momentarily washed over Rosalind. At least the baby's all right, she thought. Yet the guilt lingered. She sensed Rowan's tension whenever the doctor mentioned specifics of gestational age, as if each new fact threatened to reveal the unspoken truth. As they left, Rowan gently squeezed her shoulder. "Everything's okay. That's what matters," he murmured. She forced a nod, wishing her chest didn't feel so tight. That evening, they visited the Taylor home, a spacious brownstone in the Upper East Side, belonging to Rosalind's parents, Edward and Lorraine Taylor. The interior gleamed with carefully chosen decor-polished floors, tasteful artwork, and a large dining table already set for dinner. Lorraine, with her perfectly coiffed hair, embraced Rosalind. "Darling, you're glowing," she exclaimed. "We're so excited about the baby." Edward offered a reserved handshake to Rowan, who responded with polite courtesy. Dinner conversation revolved around the impending grandchild. Lorraine pressing details about the nursery, Edward inquiring about possible baby names. Rosalind answered mechanically. She felt her mother's beaming eyes on her, and for a brief moment she almost convinced herself everything was normal. "We've ordered a lovely crib for you," Lorraine said with pride. "Imported wood, top off the line." "That's kind. Thank you," Rosalind replied softly. Rowan mostly nodded along, feigning calm. Inside, he was unsettled. Observing Rosalind's forced smiles only sharpened his instincts that something was seriously amiss. After dinner, Lorraine pulled Rowan aside in the living room. "You look tired, dear," she noted gently. "I hope you're not overworking yourself. Rosalind needs you more than ever." He mustered a grin. "I'm fine, Mrs. Taylor. I just want to be sure we're ready for the baby." Lorraine nodded approvingly. "Yes, well, we're counting on you. She's our only daughter." Across the room, Rosalind stood by the window, Killian's latest text blinking on her phone screen. "Thinking of you, call me." She quickly locked the screen, stomach twisting. She couldn't handle that tonight. Back at their apartment, Rosalind slipped into bed early, claiming exhaustion. Rowan lingered in the dimly lit living room. The city sparkled through tall windows, but he hardly noticed. Instead, he spread out documents on the coffee table, ostensibly bureau files, yet half his attention was on an envelope containing baby-related hospital forms. He rubbed his temples. DNA test. A thought echoed. What if I push for it? He remembered how Rosalind often deflected whenever the subject arose. He also recalled a conversation with Marina back in London, urging him to seek the truth. Should he demand a prenatal test? But the doctor might warn about health risks. And if Rosalind refused, what then? Rowan's mind spiraled. He pictured the child, her child, someone else's child. Could I still love the baby if it's not mine? Hours ticked by. He ended up dozing on the couch, uncertain whether he feared the truth more than the lie. The next morning arrived under a cloudy sky that threatened rain. Rowan had been called in to meet a visiting bureau liaison, Marina Price, who flew into New York on short notice. They convened in a small briefing room at the local bureau field office. Marina wore a charcoal suit, hair neatly pinned back. As they finished discussing a minor intel update, she studied Rowan's face. "You're a million miles away," she observed, crossing her arms. "Everything at home still unresolved?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Rosalind's pregnant, but I'm not sure I'm—" He trailed off, I suspect it might not be mine. A flicker of concern crossed Marina's expression. Have you asked her directly? Or considered a test? Rowan exhaled heavily. I tried bringing it up once, and she got so upset, like I was accusing her of something horrible. He recalled the fights, the tense hush. I don't want to hurt her or the baby, but I can't live with this knot in my gut. Marina placed a hand on his shoulder. If you suspect, you have to be honest. Ask for a prenatal paternity test, if possible, or wait until birth. But you can't bury your fear under politeness. He gave a grim nod. I know. His phone buzzed with a text from Rosalind. We need to talk when you get home. That afternoon, Rowan returned to the apartment. He found Rosalind pacing in the kitchen, her cheeks flushed. She clutched her phone in one hand, knuckles white. What's wrong? Rowan asked cautiously, setting down his coat. Her eyes flashed with a swirl of anger and anxiety. Killian called me, she blurted, voice shaking. He asked about a test. He's worried about rumors at the firm. People suspect something. Rowan's stomach dropped. Rumors? Are you two... He stopped, voice cracking. Rosalind, I have to know, is he... She threw up her hands defensively. I can't, I'm not. She was near tears, grappling for words. You want a test, too, don't you? Everyone wants me to prove something. Rowan squared his jaw, stepping closer. You're pregnant, and the timing is questionable. You want me to just pretend? To live in doubt? Her voice rose, trembling. You're talking about jabbing needles for a prenatal DNA test that could be dangerous for the baby. There are safe methods, he argued, voice taut. I've read about non-invasive tests using your blood. If we do it soon, we'll know, without risk. She shook her head vehemently, tears streaking her cheeks. Why can't you trust me? Bam! She slammed her palm against the countertop, knocking a glass to the floor in a loud crash. Shards scattered across the tiles. Rowan instinctively reached for her arm, but she pulled away, chest heaving. You have no idea how scared I am, she cried, tears mixing with anger. About everything. About losing you. About facing what I've done. Silence charged the air. Rowan's heart thundered. Rosalind, what did you do? He whispered, dread slithering in his tone. She just let out a sob, refusing to meet his eyes. He glanced at the broken glass on the floor, the reflection of their broken trust. A wave of helpless fury surged in him. Fine, he snapped, voice cracking. If you won't let me settle this with a test, then I can't stay here drowning in suspicion. He stormed into the bedroom, grabbing an overnight bag. Rosalind's sobs echoed behind him. His hands shook as he shoved clothes in haphazardly. She hovered by the doorway, hugging her midsection, face pale. Rowan? She choked. Please, don't. He brushed past her, bag in hand, ignoring her plea. Guilt and rage battled in his chest. I have to get out of here, was his only clear thought. Moments later, the apartment door slammed, leaving Rosalind alone, trembling by the shattered glass. Rowan checked into a modest hotel a few blocks away. The room, though clean, felt stiflingly small. He dropped onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. Part of him wanted to rush back, comfort Rosalind, say everything was okay. But he couldn't. Not with the gaping hole of uncertainty. Outside, traffic whooshed past the window. He glanced at his phone, no message from Rosalind. He pictured her sobbing, pregnant, and his chest constricted with guilt. Yet he also felt a surge of betrayal. If she was lying, how could he forgive that? Eventually, he forced himself to lie down, staring blankly at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him. Meanwhile, in the darkened apartment, Rosalind wiped her tears, kneeling on the kitchen floor with a broom, sweeping up the glass shards. Every shard felt like a piece of her crumbling life, her career threatened by rumors, her marriage teetering on a fragile ledge, and the baby she simultaneously adored and feared. As she disposed of the glass, she pressed a trembling hand to her belly. I'm sorry, she whispered to the child. I'm sorry. Morning dawned gray and drizzly. In her midtown apartment, Rosalind woke bleary-eyed, forced herself to dress, then realized she had no motivation to head into the office. She was still on partial leave. Instead, she settled on the couch, phone clutched in her hand. A knock startled her. Opening the door, she found Killian Sanders, coat collar damp from the drizzle. He wore a tense expression. I know you said you wanted space, he began softly, but I have to talk to you. May I come in? Rosalind let him in, swallowing nervously. The living room, normally neat, still showed signs of last night's chaos, a few personal items strewn about, the air heavy with tension. Killian, if Rowan finds you here. He raised a hand. I heard he left. Something about a hotel. His gaze swept her face. Look, Rosalind, my name's being floated around the firm. They're suspecting an affair. If this goes public, my position is at risk. She looked away, arms wrapped around her belly. And what about me? She asked bitterly. I might lose my husband, my reputation, everything. Killian exhaled, dropping onto a nearby chair. I just want to confirm you'll keep quiet about me being the father. If that's the case, of course. Her eyes flashed. Stop pressuring me. You think I can just pretend? Rowan's desperate for a test. If I keep refusing, he'll suspect even more. A moment passed in strained silence. Killian hesitated, then said, If he does a post-birth test and it's mine, we'll figure out a private arrangement. But we can't let the entire world know. Rosalind let out a harsh laugh. So that's your solution? A hush deal? He stiffened. It's reality. You want to upend your life, your family's name, for a man who's away half the time? Tears brimmed. She stared at him, heart pounding with resentment. Killian was partly responsible for this mess, but he seemed focused only on self-preservation. At last, she spat, Get out! Her voice shook. He stood, lips pressed in a thin line. Fine, but if the truth does come out, remember I warned you about the fallout. Killian exited, leaving Rosalind trembling, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. Across town at his hotel, Rowan stared at his phone. A text from the bureau beeped. Urgent meeting. Middle Eastern briefing, you're needed ASAP. He sighed heavily. The message included a note from his superior, hinting at a new assignment in a conflict zone. The thought of leaving again, especially now with his marriage in tatters, felt unbearable. But he also felt cornered. What could he do in this standoff with Rosalind? Marina texted soon after. Heard you might be deployed. Are you all right? He typed back a blunt reply. Not really, but I might go. No reason to stay. Setting the phone aside, Rowan recalled the last confrontation with Rosalind, her tears, and the child she carried. I'm suffocating here, he thought. Maybe I should run. Guilt and sorrow mingled in his chest. That evening, Rowan found himself pacing the quiet hotel hallway. Unable to stand his own thoughts, he impulsively dialed Marina's number. When she answered, her tone was gentle. I heard rumors you might be heading to the Middle East again, she said. This must be tough. He leaned against the wall. Yeah, I can't handle being stuck in limbo. My wife refuses a test, and every conversation ends in tears or accusations. Maybe leaving for a while is easier. Marina paused before responding. Running away rarely solves anything. But if you can't find answers, maybe distance might clear your head. The words stung with truth. He murmured his thanks, ending the call. A hush filled the corridor as he returned to his room. If I accept deployment, I'll vanish from Rosalind's life at a critical moment. Yet a small part of him welcomed the escape. A humid summer night shrouded New York City as Rosalind lay in bed, sweat beading on her brow. She was barely 8 months along, but felt sharp pangs slicing through her abdomen. She gritted her teeth, breath unsteady. Not yet, she whispered to the empty room. It's too early. But the contractions didn't listen. Panic flared. Her phone was out of reach, so she struggled upright, each movement sending agony ripping through her. Finally, she grabbed it, half collapsing on the couch. She dialed Rowan's number voicemail. He must be at some bureau meeting. Desperate, she called an ambulance. The next hour blurred in a rush of paramedics, blaring sirens and bright hospital lights. Rowan arrived at the hospital in a frantic swirl, alerted by a single missed call from Rosalind's phone and a curt text from her mother. She's gone into labor early. Come now. He dashed into the maternity ward, heart pounding, ignoring the dryness in his throat. In a hallway, he spotted Lorraine and Edward Taylor, both looking stricken. Where is she? Rowan demanded. Delivery room, Lorraine managed, voice trembling. They say it's urgent. A nurse escorted him inside. Rosalind lay on the bed, face twisted with pain, an IV in her arm. Her eyes flickered with relief and fear when she saw him. He approached, gently taking her hand. "I'm here," he murmured, adrenaline flooding him. Despite all the betrayal and anger, seeing her in such distress overwhelmed every other emotion. "It hurts," she gasped. "They said the baby's coming early." He stroked her damp hair back, swallowing a knot of anxiety. "Breathe, you got this." Doctors and nurses moved swiftly, prepping for an emergency delivery. Rowan stood at her side, holding her hand tight as she pushed through the painful contractions. Time lost meaning. The room rang with medical chatter, the beeping of monitors, Rosalind's cries. At last, a wailing cry filled the room. Rosalind collapsed back, tears streaking her cheeks. Rowan's pulse thundered as he glimpsed the newborn, a small, wriggling figure, tiny fists flailing in the harsh light. A nurse quickly clamped the cord, the doctor announcing it was a boy. Exhausted but dazed, Rosalind's face lit with raw emotion. She reached weakly for the child. Rowan's eyes burned with tears, the moment rushing over him, fatherhood, or perhaps a cruel reminder if the baby wasn't his. But for now, he couldn't deny the tug of protectiveness. "Congratulations," a nurse said softly, placing the infant into Rosalind's arms. The baby's cries quieted to whimpers. Rowan hovered, heart pounding, tears threatening. He gently placed a hand on the baby's head, feeling its soft warmth. He glanced at Rosalind, whose expression was a storm of relief and guilt. Over the next hours, Rosalind was cleaned up and monitored. The baby was whisked away for a quick check in the neonatal unit. Rowan stepped out to the corridor, mind spinning. Lorraine and Edward approached, relief etched on their faces. "He's tiny, but doctors say stable," Edward said, exhaling. Lorraine patted Rowan's shoulder. "Thank you for being here." Rowan forced a nod, but a hollow ache throbbed inside. He recalled the detective-like suspicion that had trailed him for months. Could this be my son? Or have I been living a lie? A nurse passed by, urging Rowan to sign some paperwork. Among them was an offer for cord blood storage and, discreetly, an option for paternity confirmation. Rowan hesitated, but the memory of his months of anguish spurred him on. He quietly filled out the forms, requesting a discreet test. He had to know. 2 days later, the baby remained under observation, but was doing well enough for limited visitors. Rosalind was recovering, pale but mobile. Rowan hovered near her bed, prepared to take her home soon. The tension between them was electric. They barely spoke, dancing around the unspoken truth. A gloved hospital official approached Rowan privately in the hallway, passing him a sealed envelope. He recognized the paternity test results. Blood rushing in his ears, he slid out the page, scanning the lines with dread. Probability of paternity? 0%. He stared, mind reeling as if the floor had dropped away. His breath caught in a silent gasp. The final crushing confirmation. This was not his child. He crumpled the paper, tears pricking his eyes. All those months of doubt, and it's true. A wave of heartbreak and betrayal clashed in his chest, threatening to choke him. Steadying himself, he strode back into Rosalind's room. She was sitting up, baby asleep in the bassinet nearby. At his approach, she glimpsed the shattered look on his face and understood. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Rowan," she whispered, voice cracking. He said nothing, merely handed her the balled-up paper. She flattened it, lips trembling as she read. The air in the room turned suffocating. She could barely speak. "I'm so sorry," she finally managed. "It all happened so fast. I never—" He shut his eyes, the agony etched on his face. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. No final glances, no goodbye, just the echo of the door shutting. Rosalind collapsed against the pillows, sobbing, the weight of her choices crushing her. Outside, nurses bustled, doctors consulted. But in that small hospital room, her world had shattered in an instant. Night pressed down on the Manhattan skyline, neon lights flickering across quiet streets. Inside the hospital's postpartum unit, Rosalind Taylor sat in a cramped recovery room. Her newborn son dozed in a bassinet. She herself looked fragile, eyes red from weeping, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of betrayal. A soft knock broke the silence. Rowan Davis stepped in, his face drawn and pale. Days had passed since he learned the brutal truth. He was not the baby's father. There'd been no real conversation, only a few stilted updates about the newborn's health. Now, he stood by the closed door, an envelope clutched in his hand. "Are you here to see the baby?" Rosalind asked, voice raspy. Rowan didn't move closer. He fixed her with a pained stare. "No," he said quietly, lifting the envelope. "I got your test results, too. The hospital mailed duplicates." His tone was clipped, each word cutting like a blade. Rosalind's lips trembled. She had no defense left. She swallowed hard and nodded. "I'm sorry," she whispered, echoing the apology she'd given since the day he found out. Rowan took a step forward, setting the envelope on a nearby table. "That's not enough," he managed, voice shaking with anger. "You lied to me for months. Let me believe I was a father. Built my hopes." He caught himself, inhaling sharply. Her tears returned, streaking her cheeks. "I never wanted it to be like this," she said shakily. "I was terrified. I kept putting off telling you, thinking maybe the child was yours, or maybe I'd find a way out." In that moment, Rowan's fury broke through in a storm of words. "You had me picking out baby clothes, smiling for your parents while you knew." He paused, fighting to keep his voice down for the baby's sake. His fists clenched at his sides. "You watched me wrestle with suspicion, and never once told me the truth." Rosalind winced. "I couldn't." He shook his head, eyes wet with bitter grief. "The father is Killian, right? Just say it once and for all." Her tearful gaze fell to the floor. "Yes, it's Killian's baby," she murmured. "It was an accident, Rowan, I swear. That night at the office, I was so lonely." "Stop," he snapped, voice raw. He didn't want details. All he wanted was to wake from this nightmare. An unbearable silence filled the room. The overhead fluorescent hummed. Rosalind pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling sobs as she reached toward him. "Rowan, please," she choked. "Give me a chance to explain, to make it right. I know you must hate me." He recoiled, the recoil of a wounded animal. "Hate you?" he echoed bitterly. "I hate what you did. I hate that you destroyed everything I believed in. And now, no more illusions." Rosalind sagged under the weight of his words. Her baby stirred in the bassinet, letting out a tiny whimper, as if sensing the tension. She forced herself to stand, crossing to calm him. Rowan watched, an ache twisting inside him. Despite his anguish, a part of him still cared that Rosalind was hurting. But he forced that softness down, anger fueling his resolve. "I'm done," he said at last, voice low and final. "Our marriage, whatever it was, it's over." Rosalind's knees nearly buckled. "No," she pleaded, glancing over her shoulder, tears still falling. "We can fix this." "There's nothing left to fix." Rowan's eyes flicked to the sleeping infant, then back to Rosalind. "I'm not the father, and I can't keep living a lie." He turned on his heel, crossing the room in long strides. At the threshold, he paused, but didn't look back. "I'll send someone for my things." And he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Rosalind sank to the chair, pressing her face to the baby's swaddled form, sobbing as her entire world collapsed. Minutes later, Edward and Lorraine Taylor arrived, alerted by a frantic nurse who recognized the family name. They found Rosalind trembling, hugging her child while tears silently streamed down her cheeks. "Sweetheart?" Lorraine whispered, gently rubbing Rosalind's shoulders. "Where's Rowan?" Rosalind couldn't answer. Her parents exchanged worried glances. Edward stepped forward, stoic in his protective posture. "Rosalind, talk to us," he urged softly. She forced out a broken explanation. Rowan wasn't the father. He'd left. Everything was ruined. Lorraine's hand flew to her mouth. Edward's face drained of color. "Oh, my dear," Lorraine whispered, stroking Rosalind's hair. "We had no idea." A nurse entered, checking the baby's vitals. She frowned at the tension in the room but said nothing. Once she departed, Edward tried to speak. "We'll stand by you," he said firmly, though heartbreak laced his tone. "Just focus on your child now. Let us handle the rest." Rosalind nodded numbly. She knew she'd lost Rowan's love, and nothing her parents did could change that. 2 weeks later, a cool wind swept across New York, hinting at the change of seasons. In a small, modest apartment that Rosalind had moved into temporarily away from prying neighbors and old memories, she cradled her infant son, pacing the living room floor. The baby fussed, crying inconsolably. Rosalind tried to soothe him with gentle shushing, but her own stress radiated through. Her once pristine hair was pulled into a messy bun, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. She wore old sweats, a stark contrast to the polished attire she once donned at Hawthorne and Pearson. Killian had all but vanished, refusing to return calls beyond a terse text. "This is your decision, stop involving me." She felt bitter anger at his cowardice, but also recognized she'd allowed his influence to unravel her world. Rowan refused to answer any messages. Rosalind had typed countless apologies, pleas, explanations, only to watch them go unread. She tried calling day and night. His silence was like a wall of ice. When she mustered the courage to visit Hawthorne and Pearson for paperwork, whispers trailed her steps. Colleagues who once admired her potential now gossiped about her scandal. She overheard hushed remarks. "I heard she cheated on her husband with a partner. No wonder she's on leave." She hurried through the halls, head down. Her supervisor, Miss Donovan, took her aside, wearing a look of pity. "Rosalind, perhaps it's best if you extend your remote work arrangement. The environment here might be challenging for you." Translation: the firm wanted her far from the spotlight, at least until the rumor mill settled. Rosalind swallowed her pride, nodding in resignation. Back at her cramped apartment, Rosalind sank onto the worn couch, baby napping in a portable bassinet by her side. She scrolled her phone, checking for any sign of Rowan. Nothing. She stared at the screen, tears threatening again. Finally, she decided to dial a number Trevor Davis, Rowan's older brother, who occasionally invested money for them. Trevor answered after a few rings, sounding cautious. "Rosalind, didn't expect to hear from you." Her voice cracked. "Trevor, please, can you tell Rowan to meet me? Just once?" She poured out her heartbreak, how she couldn't cope alone, how her baby needed stability. Trevor's sigh crackled through the line. "He's not living with me, if that's what you're thinking. I only know he's rented a place near the Bureau's field office. He's hurt. Very hurt." She stifled a sob. "I understand," she managed, "but can you help me talk to him?" "I need to apologize." Trevor hesitated. "I'll pass the message, but I won't promise anything. He's set on shutting you out." End of call. Rosalind set the phone down, tears rolling silently. She glanced at her sleeping infant, guilt gnawing at her soul. "I did this to us," she thought miserably, "and now I have no way back." Days bled together. The baby's demands were relentless feedings, diaper changes, late-night fussing, and Rosalind's energy slipped away. She rarely ate more than a few bites of leftover takeout. Bills piled up, her once lucrative job in limbo. Her mother, Lorraine, stopped by occasionally to help, but the tension between them was evident. Lorraine would fuss over the baby, sighing about how things might have been so different if only. One afternoon, battered by exhaustion and shame, Rosalind found herself hunched over the kitchen sink, tears splashing into the soapy water. The baby's cries rang from the other room, and she felt a wave of dizziness, fear that she might faint. "I can't keep going like this," she gasped. Memories of Rowan's stoic face haunted her. She pictured Killian's betrayal, the hush of disapproving co-workers, her father's disappointed gaze. But a tiny wail from the living room snapped her back. She had a child to raise, regardless of her regrets. She forced herself to straighten, inhaling shakily before tending to the baby once more. Miles from New York, Rowan Davis braced himself against a cold gust sweeping across a windswept airfield in Eastern Europe. He'd accepted a short-term overseas assignment through the Bureau, eager to escape the pain at home. He wore standard operational gear, scanning the horizon with a steely focus, though inside he felt hollow. Nearby, intelligence officers bustled around a small outpost building. Rowan had thrown himself into these tasks, coordination with local forces, analyzing data on cross-border smuggling in an attempt to bury personal demons. Marina Price arrived from a side door, exhaling in the chill. "Hey," she greeted, calm but concerned. "We're set for the next briefing if you're ready." Rowan nodded curtly, stepping inside. The briefing was routine. Slides on suspicious movements, supply routes, suspect profiles. While others took notes, Rowan caught himself drifting. His mind latched onto memories of that hospital room, that final heartbreak when he discovered the baby wasn't his. After the session, Marina lingered behind as the rest of the team filed out. She studied Rowan's distant gaze. "You good?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Better than being in New York." She walked closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Hiding here won't make it go away," she said, not unkindly. "But I understand. Is there any chance you can talk to Rosalind?" "Clear the air." "What's left to clear?" Rowan replied, bitterness slipping into his voice. "She lied about the baby. It's not mine, and she used me as cover. I can't forgive that." Marina's eyes flickered with sympathy. "Then at least forgive yourself. You did nothing wrong. You were the victim of her deception." He inhaled, shoulders taut. A swirl of regret and anger clung to him. "It just still hurts," he admitted, voice rough. In the following weeks, Rowan and Marina worked side by side, forging a quiet camaraderie. Emails from the Bureau indicated that a new intelligence cell needed their expertise. They traveled from one outpost to another, chasing leads. During downtime, Marina sometimes coaxed Rowan to confide in her about his swirling emotions. One chilly evening, they stood by a rusted chain-link fence, scanning the horizon for potential infiltration. The stars shone faintly overhead. Rowan rubbed his hands together for warmth. "I keep replaying it," he said, words tumbling out. "How I held that baby in my arms, how I felt this surge of love." He closed his eyes. Then it all vanished. Marina touched his shoulder. "You can still feel love, Rowan. Maybe not for that baby, not in the same way. But you're not broken, just wounded." He offered a rueful smile. "Thanks for listening. I'm trying to move forward." A phone buzzed in his pocket, some missed call from an unknown number. He frowned at it, suspecting maybe Rosalind or her brother. He clicked ignore. Right now, he wasn't ready for whatever entreaty might be on the other end. The more time Rowan spent on the mission, the more comfortable he became confiding in Marina. She never pushed for details, but quietly supported him. Late-night coffee runs turned into longer chats about life beyond the Bureau. Rowan learned she once had her own heartbreak with a husband who left for a volunteer mission in Africa. "He found someone else there," she admitted softly. "I guess it's the nature of our line of work always away, emotional distance." Rowan nodded, empathy bridging their experiences. A flicker of something deeper passed between them, though neither said it aloud. They recognized a shared loneliness and a possible new beginning, no matter how faint. Weeks later, under a slate-gray sky back in Manhattan, Rosalind sat in a small law office across from her own attorney, Miss Chen. The baby cooed in a stroller, oblivious to the tension swirling. Stacks of legal documents lay on the desk. "This is the divorce petition from Rowan Davis's counsel," Miss Chen explained, flipping pages. "He's filed for dissolution of marriage. There's also a note about child custody, or rather, refusal of paternity." Rosalind's throat constricted. She'd half expected Rowan to vanish forever, but seeing it spelled out in legalese felt like a final blow. She wiped sweaty palms on her slacks. "He doesn't want custody?" she murmured. Miss Chen shook her head gently. "No, he states he isn't the biological father, has no interest in parental rights, and will not pay child support. However," she slid a secondary document over, "he's offering a trust fund for the child's future education, presumably out of a sense of moral duty." Tears welled in Rosalind's eyes. Even in heartbreak, Rowan had a streak of kindness. She nodded, unable to speak. Miss Chen patted her hand. "He's giving you the apartment if you want it, but I see you've moved out. The settlement is minimal. He's basically relinquishing any claim to marital property." "He just wants me gone from his life," Rosalind whispered, voice cracking. Her lawyer cleared her throat. "You could contest the terms, but if you do, his attorneys will highlight the affair. Are you prepared for that?" She shook her head fiercely. "No, I won't drag this out. I deserve whatever he wants to impose." Sighing, Miss Chen nodded. "Then I'll communicate your acceptance. There'll be a final hearing soon." Late that evening, Rosalind typed out a lengthy email to Rowan, one last plea, apologizing for everything and acknowledging the divorce. She said she hoped one day he might find happiness again. She ended with, "I will always care about you, no matter what." She hit send. Hours passed with no reply. Somewhere across the ocean or near the Bureau's offices, Rowan likely saw her name pop up and dismissed it. Her heart twisted, but she knew it was the cost of her betrayal. A few days later, Rosalind strolled the city with her baby strapped in a carrier, pondering how far she'd fallen. As she passed a cafe, a distant memory flickered once she'd had dinner dates with Rowan in such cozy spots, dreaming of a bright future. Now, every step felt heavier, overshadowed by regrets. She glanced at the child's sleeping face. "He's innocent. I'll love him enough for 2 parents," she told herself. Shortly after, she received a call from Miss Chen. Rowan signed the final documents. "The hearing is set in a few weeks. It'll be straightforward. Prepare yourself." Rosalind pressed her eyes shut, standing on a crowded sidewalk as business people hurried around her. So this is it, she thought. The end. From his vantage point in Eastern Europe, Rowan spent long hours at a bureau desk. One afternoon, he got a message from his own lawyer, confirming the divorce proceeding was nearly finalized. He stared at the screen, throat tight. "It's done," he reminded himself. "We can both move on." He exhaled, leaning back in the worn office chair. The swirl of pity and resentment churned, but he forced himself to think beyond the pain. A new mission, new horizons, possibly a future with less heartbreak. He typed a short note to his lawyer. "Proceed. No changes." Then he powered down his laptop. The final cords tying him to Rosalind frayed in that moment, leaving only the faint echo of what might have been. A pale morning sun shone through hazy clouds over the New York family court building. Rosalind Taylor stood outside, cradling her baby boy in her arms while her mother, Lorraine, gently tried to calm her. At Rosalind's feet, a small diaper bag and a folder of legal documents. The swirl of lawyers and litigants moved around them, each with their own weight of problems. "Are you ready?" Lorraine asked softly, pressing Rosalind's shoulder. Rosalind inhaled shakily, her gaze flicking to the imposing doors. "As ready as I'll ever be," she murmured, though her heart pounded. She had spent the night tossing and turning, mentally rehearsing if there was any last-ditch plea she could make to salvage even a hint of a relationship with Rowan. But from his cold silence, she suspected today would offer no miracles. They stepped inside. The air felt stale, the fluorescent lights casting harsh reflections on the pale walls. Her attorney, Miss Chen, approached with a tight smile, guiding Rosalind to a bench outside a small hearing room. Rowan Davis arrived soon after, accompanied by his lawyer. Rosalind's pulse quickened at the sight of him. He looked leaner, more tired, as though the months of heartbreak had carved sharper lines on his face. He didn't greet her, didn't even glance her way. Instead, he spoke briefly to his counsel, then nodded for them to proceed. The hearing was brief, almost anticlimactic. The judge, wearing a bored expression, reviewed the mutual agreement. No spousal support claims, given Rowan had separate premarital assets. No child support for the infant, as Rowan legally renounced paternity. A trust fund Rowan set up for the child's future education, no strings attached. Rosalind would keep the small remainder of shared savings and personal possessions. Irreconcilable differences as grounds for divorce. Rosalind's eyes stung with tears as she answered the judge's questions in a numb monotone. Rowan, similarly, offered minimal words. "Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor." Every syllable felt like another nail in the coffin of their once promising marriage. In under 20 minutes, the judge declared the marriage dissolved, then scribbled a signature. "That concludes it," the clerk announced briskly. Rosalind felt dizzy, holding her baby close. As the lawyers gathered their files, she saw Rowan turn to leave. Summoning courage, she called out in a thin voice, "Rowan, please wait." He paused, jaw tight. Slowly he faced her, hands shoved into the pockets of his dark suit. Her gaze flicked to the baby, who was dozing against her shoulder. She ventured a shaky step closer. I just wanted to say one last time," she swallowed. "I'm sorry for everything. I know I can't fix it, but I need you to know, Her words choked off. Tears welled. "Did you ever really love me?" she whispered, the question trembling in the silent corridor. Rowan's eyes flickered with an echo of old pain. He set his jaw, glancing away. Finally, he answered in a low voice, "Yes, more than I knew how to handle." A beat passed. Rosalind's tears slipped free. She started to speak again, but he shook his head sadly. "That's over now. Good luck, Rosalind." Then he turned and walked out, footsteps echoing down the hall. He never looked back. Stunned, she stood clutching the baby, hearing only the pounding of her own heartbreak. Lorraine came to her side, eyes glistening. Miss Chen quietly excused herself, letting mother and daughter have a private moment. Rosalind let out a soft sob, pressing her face to the baby's wispy hair. "It's done," she breathed. "He's gone." Once outside, Lorraine helped her hail a cab. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, Rosalind stared blankly at the world drifting by. People hurried with coffee cups. Traffic horns blared, life marched on, indifferent to her shattered illusions. In the seat, she realized how light her left hand felt without a wedding ring. She'd removed it earlier that morning, as though physically acknowledging the severed bond. The baby stirred, and she gently rocked him, vowing in her heart to somehow rebuild for his sake. A misty day shrouded the capital city's skyline, where Rowan Davis sat in a quiet conference room at the bureau. His lawyer had texted him, divorce final, papers signed. He gazed at the phone with a mixture of relief and emptiness. It's over. Outside the window, the Potomac River meandered under heavy clouds. A memory surfaced of meeting Rosalind near these waters once, sharing laughter. The memory felt like it belonged to a different man's life. Lucas Harrington, his section chief, entered with a stack of folders. "Davis, we've got a lead on a potential infiltration ring. We'll need you for an extended op in—" Rowan raised a hand, cutting him off gently. "I can't," he said, voice calm but final. "I'm resigning." Harrington blinked. "What? Davis, you're one of our best." Rowan exhaled. "I appreciate that, sir, but I've lost too much already. I need to step away from this line of work. I'm done chasing crises. I want a quieter life." He handed Harrington a typed resignation letter. The older man scanned it, face grim. "Is this about your personal troubles? Look, we can reassign you. A desk job." Rowan's lips twisted in a sad smile. "A desk job is still here. I need to be somewhere else. Thanks, though." A day later, Rowan strolled out of the bureau building with a small box of personal effects. Marina Price stood waiting on the sidewalk wearing civilian clothes, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. "Is it true?" she asked. "You're leaving?" He nodded, letting out a breath. "I can't keep living halfway around the globe chasing missions. I want a real home, a chance to breathe." Marina studied him quietly. "Where will you go?" "Maybe somewhere quiet. Scotland. I've always liked the Highlands, or a countryside in Europe. Buy some land, focus on simpler things." A pause drifted. Marina's gaze flicked to her own hands, fiddling with a coffee cup sleeve. "I've been considering leaving MI6 too. The bureaucracy, the constant relocations, it's wearing me down." Rowan searched her face. "Are you saying?" A shy nod. "Maybe we both need a reset. If we stick together, we'd watch each other's backs." His heart quickened. Even in the midst of heartbreak and confusion, the idea of forging a new path with someone who understood him lit a small flame of hope. He gently reached for her hand. "I'd like that," he said, voice thick with sincerity. Over the next few weeks, Rowan sold his small condo and closed out old accounts. With Marina's help, he researched real estate in rural Scotland, a modest stone cottage on a quiet estate, affordable thanks to his carefully invested savings. They hopped a plane to the UK, renting a car to drive north through rolling hills. As they wound along narrow country roads, the tension and noise of espionage faded into the green, misty fields. Marina breathed in the crisp air, a soft smile tugging at her lips. The cottage they viewed was humble but picturesque. Stone walls, a peaked roof, a quaint porch overlooking distant mountains. Rowan walked through each room, imagining a life free from constant adrenaline spikes and heartbreak. By dusk, he'd signed preliminary papers. The property felt right, like a chance to truly start over. They decided to stay at a nearby inn while finalizing details. Over a simple dinner by the inn's fireplace, Marina teased Rowan about learning to drive tractors or handle sheep. He laughed, the first genuine laugh in ages. Back in New York, Rosalind lived with her infant son in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Queens. The neighborhood was far from the upscale areas she once inhabited, but it offered cheaper rent and distance from prying eyes. She spent her days juggling baby care and remote work tasks from Hawthorne and Pearson. Killian Sanders barely acknowledged her existence. Their affair had blown up with staff rumors, though nothing official was proven. He'd retreated into senior partner immunity, leaving Rosalind to bear the brunt of whispering eyes. She remained on partial status, a demotion in all but name. One afternoon, she scrolled social media, an ill-advised habit. She stumbled upon an acquaintance's post, hinting that Rowan was rumored to be settling abroad. Another snippet mentioned a new companion. Rosalind's chest tightened. He's moving on. She stared at her baby's face, breath quivering. Tucking her phone away, she made a decision. Dwelling on lost love would only hinder her child's future. She emailed the firm's pro bono division, volunteering hours to assist underprivileged clients. If she had to remain on the outskirts of corporate law, at least she could do something meaningful. That same week, she reached out to local charities about volunteering for legal aid nights. Despite exhaustion, she found small fulfillment, helping single mothers or low-income families navigate complicated forms. Each time she encountered a distressed parent, she felt a pang, recalling her own meltdown. I can at least do this, she thought. Her father, Edward, was initially hesitant about her new philanthropic interests, fearing it signaled a lack of ambition. But Rosalind insisted. She needed to help, needed to redeem a spark of self-worth. At a strained family dinner, Edward and Lorraine frowned at Rosalind's living conditions. Lorraine cooed over the baby, but Edward quietly pressed, "Couldn't you come home to the brownstone? We have space, staff to help." Rosalind shook her head. "I appreciate it, but I need to stand on my own," she said gently, rocking the stroller. "I messed up my life, Dad. Let me fix it in my own way." They nodded with subdued acceptance, though Lorraine's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "We love you, dear," she whispered. After dinner, in her small apartment, Rosalind collapsed on her worn sofa. The baby dozed in a portable crib. She rummaged through old photos, stumbling across an image of her and Rowan from a happier time his arm wrapped around her at Niagara Falls. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I wish I'd never destroyed this late summer in the Scottish Highlands painted the horizon in streaks of lavender and gold." On a gently sloping pasture, Rowan Davis stood with Marina Price beneath a newly built wooden trellis. The cool breeze carried the scent of wild heather. In the distance, a small herd of sheep grazed. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck, taking in the simple farm cottage they now owned. After months of paperwork and a leap of faith, they'd moved in. He stepped onto the porch, where a rustic bench offered a view of rolling hills. Marina joined him, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. "It's beautiful," she said softly, gesturing at the tranquil expanse. "Hard to believe we were in that chaotic world just a short while ago." He smiled, an unburdened warmth in his eyes. "I never imagined leaving the bureau like that, but—" He took her hand. "I'm grateful we're here." In the dusk light, they spoke of their plans, maybe raising a few chickens, planting a garden, and living a quieter routine. Marina teased him about learning Gaelic words from local farmers. Rowan chuckled, feeling a surprising contentment bloom in his chest. Later that evening, while Marina prepared a simple stew in the kitchen, Rowan checked his phone for the first time in days. A new email from Rosalind's subject line, "I wish you happiness." His pulse stuttered. For a moment, he considered deleting it unread, but curiosity won. He opened the message. "Dear Rowan, by the time you read this, our divorce is finalized. I'm sure you've moved on. I wanted to apologize once more for my betrayal. I know an apology doesn't mend the scars. I've heard you might be starting fresh somewhere peaceful. I hope it brings you the peace I took from you. Our child is growing well. I won't burden you with details, but he's healthy. Thank you for the trust fund. One day, he'll know someone once cared about his future, even if circumstances were unfair. I accept full responsibility for what happened. I truly wish you happiness. May you find love and freedom from the pain I caused. Rosalind. Rowan's chest tightened. The words roused old sorrow, but also a strange sense of closure. He closed his eyes, letting out a slow breath. He typed a short reply, unsure if she'd ever read it. Rosalind, I received your email. Thank you for telling me he's well. I don't know what the future holds, but I hope you find peace, too. Rowan. He hit send, a faint tremor in his fingers. And that was that. Outside, the sun dipped below the Highland Hills, turning the sky a blazing orange. Rowan stepped onto the porch where Marina waited with 2 steaming bowls of stew. She saw the somber expression on his face. Everything okay? She asked gently. He managed a small nod. I got an email from Rosalind, final words, I guess. It's complicated, but I'm all right. Marina touched his arm. You're allowed to feel something. He exhaled, glancing at the radiant horizon. I feel relieved, I guess. Sad, but also ready. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in the golden light. Down in the pasture, a soft bleating from a lone sheep drifted up. The air felt crisp, full of possibility. In that peaceful moment, Rowan let the bitterness slip away, replaced by a quiet acceptance. He gazed at Marina, gratitude shining in his eyes. They sat on the porch bench, side by side, sharing the stew in comfortable silence. The hush of twilight enveloped them, a gentle wind rustling the tall grass. Overhead, the first stars began to glimmer in the indigo sky. In the distance, the mailbox perched by the country lane, perhaps holding letters from old acquaintances or official documents. But Rowan wouldn't rush to check it tonight. He'd learned that life was more than chasing every signal. Sometimes, you let the world spin at its own pace. The memory of Rosalind was still there, a scar that might never fully heal. Yet here, with Marina, he sensed the start of a new chapter, one built on honesty and calm. The last remnants of the past drifted into the cool evening air, leaving him with a profound sense of release. As the sky darkened to a velvet purple, Marina leaned her head against Rowan's shoulder. Together they watched the stars brighten, reflecting on how far they'd come. Tomorrow would bring chores, maybe fence repairs, and calls to a local vet about livestock. But tonight, they let themselves savor the quiet closeness. And in a small apartment in Queens, Rosalind put her baby to sleep, a weary smile on her face. She had chosen her new path, uncertain but determined, unburdened by illusions. The distance between them all was final. Each had found or was finding their way forward, shaped by heartbreak, but no longer imprisoned by it.